So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Liz Truss, dubbed the Brexit Queen, after the cabinet clash over Northern Ireland. So this is, again, being recorded before the legislation set to come out on Monday. I'll try and push this out for Sunday, the 12th. But Liz Truss and Suella Braverman trying to run, kind of brazen run for leadership, essentially, in the party. Liz Truss and Braverman accused of trying to flutter their leadership feathers by attempting to toughen up plans to replace the protocol. So apparently Johnson's really angry with some aspects of the legislation that's meant to come out on Monday. He has had it watered down slightly. But the issue is that he's the executive. He's ultimately the one who has power over this. If he's not happy with Truss or Braverman or Sunak or any of these people, he could replace them. He chooses not to because he's a coward at the end of the day. We know that Braverman was part of the ERG, at least I think she was at some point, right? Liz Truss is more of the question mark one because she was a Remainer. And now look at her. Truss, the Foreign Secretary, and Braverman, the AG, clashed with rivals Gove and Sunak in tense talks about the new legislation to replace the protocol. Northern Ireland, so under the new legislation, Northern Ireland will be subject to dual regulations. So regulations by both the UK and EU rules when the bill is unveiled next week. And so what that means is that the manufacturers or companies can choose whether they want to use the UK rules or the EU rules. And so obviously that blows a massive hole in the EU single market again, because what if these Northern Ireland businesses manufacture goods that are up to UK specification but not up to the EU specification? Because that will happen soon because of the deregulation the Tories are doing. When that happens, how do the EU stop that? Because that will put a hole in the single market, because goods from Northern Ireland can flow freely into the EU. They talk about an automatic sunset clause demanded by some Brexiteers would be dropped. So essentially a sunset clause on EU regulations, which effectively means that after a certain date, these regulations will not work. The EU jurisdiction, I'm assuming the regulations bit, the sunset clause on EU legislation is something Mulg has pushed. But with the EU jurisdiction, this is about courts. So essentially they want a sunset date on when the European Court of Justice or any of the EU courts wouldn't be able to intervene in protocol disputes, which is just stupid. Sunak won a concession on whether the Treasury could alter VAT in the province rather than make it a UK-wide thing. So I'm assuming that what that means is that Sunak can alter the VAT rates in Northern Ireland if he wants to. Currently, he can't do that unilaterally because of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Sunak wants the power to be there. He wants the power to be able to do that if he wants to, a source said. And that's the key there, that this legislation gives ministers the power to breach the protocol. The legislation itself, I don't think is a breach. Once it's used, it will be. Truss and Braverman dubbed the Brexit Queens, which there can only be one queen, so that means Braverman really is the Brexit princess, which not too envious a position. They were backed by other cabinet ministers, including Kwasi Kwarteng, Dominic Raab, Brandon Lewis, and Mr. Gove. So if we look at these people, I think Kwasi Kwarteng is the energy minister. Dominic Raab, obviously Deputy Prime Minister in charge of the judiciary, which this legislation is aiming to take the British judiciary out of the protocol changes by the nature of the changes in the legislation. Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, he's meant to be there to keep good relations and potentially rule over Northern Ireland if Stormont is closed like it is now. It's ironic that the person who's meant to help Northern Ireland is the one damaging them the most. Obviously, Michael Gove. Against Mr. Gove, sorry. And the surprising Gove has actually tried to adhere to international law. It's very strange given the guy's erratic at best. Sunak, the Chancellor, Anne-Marie, I can never pronounce her second name, the International Trade Secretary. Now, if we break this down right, what the split it looks like is against is Sunak, Anne-Marie, and Gove are on the opposite side. They're the ones who want to keep the protocol intact by the looks of it. They don't want to breach international law. So it's quite interesting that obviously Sunak fearing a trade war because it would damage the economy massively and make him look like a mug. Anne-Marie, it would make it harder for Britain to get trade deals because no one's going to trust us. Gove is the interesting one because, again, what does he lose out of this apart from making levelling up more expensive? But levelling up in itself is a joke because it's not happening. Sources said there were some surprises, or when Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, who is said to have used colourful language during the meeting, initially sided with Gove and Sunak. So essentially it was a bit of a change of heart from Johnson, who was against some of the changes. The Prime Minister told the meeting very clearly, our objective is not to be sovereignty purists, which it looks like Lord Frost is, but to find solutions that work in practice. So Johnson really doesn't want a trade war. But I think he's allowed Liz Truss to step out ahead and take most of the flak, because he's going to try and simmer things down and take the credit for it and make kind of put Liz down a peg or two. Johnson, one Brexiteer cabinet source claimed Michael Gove has been fighting hard on the protocol bill to keep the EU aligned. So essentially, I think he wants to keep the EU on side, which is interesting. A second source said it was still a good bill, but not 100%, which is unnecessary and a shame, because even now, once the bill gets put before Parliament, it will get watered down potentially by MPs, but more importantly, the Lords will try and make amendments. And the thing is, the more the Lords try to amend things and the more the Commons want to get those amendments undone, the more time it takes to pass this. They're saying this legislation could take a year all in to pass, which is a long time. One source close to Sunak and Gove said that the meeting was characterised by a lot of this feather fluttering from leadership wannabes, keen to impress the Tory party Eurosceptic base. And what you can see is pretty brazen, a dig from Sunak and Gove's camp, which say that the only reason that Truss and Braverman are doing this is in order to appeal to the ERG in a potential leadership race. Which is exactly what's happening here. These people are playing games with the people in Northern Ireland and the people in Great Britain, because they're desperate to be in charge. This is the price they'll pay for power. A Downing Street source defended the new legislation, insisting that the result had to be balanced to protect north-south and east-west trade. But, again, the Good Friday Agreement is about north-south trade, not east-west. Ministers are desperately hoping that the new bill will be enough to persuade the DUP to go back and restore Stormont. That's not going to happen. I think they're going to wait for this thing to be used. That's the smart thing for them to do, because of their crazy ideology, not because I believe in anything they do. They're genuinely weirdos. But yeah, separately, Eurosceptic Tory MPs threaten to vote down the measures if they are too weak to appease the DUP anger over the border. And the DUP, the ERG really don't care about the DUP, and I'll tell you why. The ERG are the ones who basically are part of the group that killed the Theresa May deal. The Theresa May deal is far better for the DUP, because it would have kept the entirety of the United Kingdom inside the EU's customs union single market, not like it is now, separated. Great Britain from Northern Ireland, I mean. So the Eurosceptic bits don't make any sense, but what they want is strong legislation to really, really unalign from the EU. So Bernard Jenkin, a veteran idiot Brexiteer, warned if the government does not bring forward a bill which holds out the serious prospect of restoration of power sharing in Northern Ireland and the restoration of the Good Friday Agreement, I'll vote against it. Well, it might vote for the... It might bring back power sharing in Northern Ireland. It will not restore the Good Friday Agreement. Nothing to do. The protocol supports the Good Friday Agreement. I don't know why it's so hard for these people to understand that. But the thing is, if these ERG people are not kind of listened to, they can vote down the legislation. They can try and rebel against it. Labour won't back the legislation. It might be very difficult for the Tories to get this passed, because, if it's the case that the Conservative Party, because the problem with a broad church, right, is you have certain people in the Conservative Party who don't want to break international law and don't support this legislation, right? Then you've got people in the ERG who want this thing to go as far as possible to really rip up the protocol, right? What if you pass legislation that only appeals to the ERG? You might not get it passed because you need to appeal to the Theresa May types. What if you do it too close to the Theresa May types? You won't get the ERG to support it. So essentially, because of this still existing broad church within the Tory party, which is weird because there was a purge in 2019, let's not forget, the Tory party is still struggling to kind of function here. Duncan Smith, the former Tory leader, added, the Good Friday Agreement is also itself an international agreement. Well done. Well done. You've acknowledged that the Good Friday Agreement is an international agreement. Well done. Congratulations. You've actually said something that's factual and makes sense. And then he goes, it's an absolute priority that the Good Friday Agreement should function as a priority above all else. If you genuinely believe that, surely then you want the protocol to work because the protocol supports the Good Friday Agreement. No? You just debunk yourself, Ian, mate. Your first statement in pink there, great. The rest of it, not great. The DUP's Jim Shannon said the government had to hold to their word to remove protocol barriers, to remove barriers between GB and NI. He accused the government of asking Northern Ireland to watch their businesses crumble, which is not actually true. Northern Ireland's actually recovered far well than I think England, Scotland and Wales has from COVID. And that's in part because of the protocol. So it's absolute nonsense. He goes, this is just to pacify Remainers. This Tory government does not want to pacify Remainers. They've actively gone out their way to go for one of the hardest forms of Brexit they could have done. The only way it could have been worse is if they got a no-deal Brexit. in this chamber who will not accept democracy and are prepared to sacrifice peace in Northern Ireland. How many Remainers are there in the Tory party, though? Because you purged a lot of them in 2019 and you've got a stonking majority. If the Conservative government cannot get this passed, that shows you the wider issues that exist within the party. It's not to pacify Remainers. Ridiculous statement from Jim Shannon. The threat of rebellion came as government sources denied outright reports that the government did not ask Sir James Eddy. So that's a person we mentioned before. He's the independent barrister for the government. They didn't ask him for a legal opinion on whether the bill would break international law. So that's alleged. I don't know if that's 100% true. Again, it says, denied outright reports. So I think it's very likely they didn't ask Sir James Eddy because he could have picked holes in the government's current legal advice. If we look back to an article that I should have covered, depending on how the time machine works, if we have a look at this, right? It's been argued that it'd be very difficult for the government to credibly claim there is no alternative to unilaterally overriding the protocol. This was leaked correspondence from a senior legal advisor. So I think this point holds true that if the government do get this thing passed, we will be breaching international law here. As soon as this thing's used, that's when the breach will actually happen, but they are setting the stage for it to happen. So look, I'm going to leave it there. I think this was an interesting one to go through because you can clearly see what's going on here, and I've been talking about this for months, that you've got Liz Truss, right, who's trying to appeal to the ERG as much as possible, because at the end of the day, it'll be a race between two people of who's going to win the Tory leadership race and be the next Prime Minister. Liz Truss wants to guarantee her name on the podium, basically, because she's going to prove herself to be the most Brexity of the lot. And so that means her opponent will struggle when it comes to voting for the base. How the TV debates are going to go, I have no idea. But this is the game she's playing, and she's played it well. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.